So everybody's getting an upfront and close personal understanding of a rug pull. No, we're just going to close this out 10, 15 minutes. And what Harry and I think is a really important thing for people in the audience to understand is why proof of work. Why back a digital asset by energy? And there's nobody better than Harry with tons of experience in the mining space to address that core and important question.
Thanks, Preston, and apologies. You were always going to be subjected to me, but maybe perhaps more of me than we'd initially anticipated. I think that it's a really great opportunity for us to close on the core innovation that Bitcoin delivered, because we don't have this whole sort of Cambrian explosion without it. And so, why is Bitcoin different? You heard other people on this stage, incredibly eloquently talk about the scarcity, the immutability, the censorship resistance of Bitcoin. These are all phenomenal properties, but why is Bitcoin the technology able to deliver on that value proposition? And what did Satoshi do differently in designing this system to allow for these value propositions to exist and be validated now over 15, 16 years? And so, in the spirit of this panel subjecting you to something you didn't perhaps anticipate, the core innovation that Satoshi delivered was introducing this concept of proof of work and what is called the difficulty adjustment inside of the Bitcoin technology stack. And what proof of work is it just means that the network needs to demonstrate that enough computing was spent in order to produce the next block of transactions. And so we call that provable costliness. So we know that you have to buy a certain amount of energy to power a certain amount of computers in order to process the next block's worth of transactions. And everything else that makes Bitcoin special and different falls downstream of that technical innovation. The reason that there's only 21 million is because of that innovation. The reason that a bajillion miners can't all just plug in and accelerate the monetary supply is because of this second piece, not just the proof of work, but the proof of work getting married to the difficulty adjustment. So inside of the Bitcoin system, every 2016 blocks, or roughly 2 weeks, the network readjusts based on how much computing happened over that prior period and either speeds up how quickly blocks are produced, it makes it easier to mine, or, as we've seen very persistently over the last 15 years, the network makes it harder to mine the next block. So more incremental computing is required to produce the same amount of Bitcoin. That means that the Bitcoin monetary policy of the halvings and the emission schedule are self-regulating. It means that there is no Chairman Powell of Bitcoin. Bitcoin, the network, is self-governing and is imposing its monetary policy upon all of us who choose to participate in the network more broadly. That blew my mind when I first discovered what Bitcoin was and why it might matter. I heard the common refrain, rules over rulers. And the difficulty adjustment paired with proof of work expressed through the monetary policy is the reason why Bitcoin can credibly say that rules beat rulers. And they have every single block for the last 15 plus years now. So great, that's a technical innovation. How did it work in practice? Today it means that there are double-digit gigawatts of energy all over the world enforcing this monetary policy that has now created the economic center of mass to the tune of $2 trillion in market cap. It's why someone like Michael Saylor can get on stage and say, I'm willing to bet the entire farm on this asset. I have the confidence that the immutable properties of this network are going to be expressed on behalf of all of my shareholders, and I'm going to deliver them transcendent value over time. Because I believe in the system that sits underneath all of this. And the reason that I'm able to do that is because there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of megawatt hours getting used to secure and deliver on a value proposition that Satoshi wrote into a white paper that now is bigger than, what is it? Bitcoin's the 8th biggest asset in the world? you know, the transformational nature of taking an idea that starts as a technical innovation and then gets expressed over economies growing to be larger than most economies. Not very many people have the opportunity to interact with an asset like that during its earliest days and then watch it reach maturity and extend, you know, not just to hundreds of thousands of households or millions of households, but to hear about that type of innovation get embraced by an administration and by the congressional representatives, you know, that are responsible for the taxpayers and the citizens of the largest economy in the world. That type of symbiotic relationship between technical innovation, policy, and the entrepreneurial community is something that we can't take lightly. And I'll spoil some of the questions I was going to ask Senator Cruz are, you know, what's the relationship between innovation, national security, and the responsibility that we all have to ourselves and each other? And how does Bitcoin play a role in making good on that supreme promise that the American dream is? Why does this matter, and why does this technology matter? It matters because it's an expression of a value set that, you know, I've chosen to express entrepreneurially. Senator Cruz, chose to express in the service that he's delivered to his country. And the really incredible thing is that the number of people who are willing to engage sort of on good faith basis now is tremendous. And so I think that the relationship between energy abundance, financial abundance, and freedom abundance is captured in the technical innovation that Satoshi delivered on and expressed through the difficulty adjustment and proof of work. And so what I would leave you with today, if I may be so bold, is to extend this idea of proof of work into your daily lives. It's what I try to do. It's that your relationships are a function of the accumulated proof of work that you've poured into them. Your finances are the accumulation of the proof of work that you've poured into them. It's about delayed gratification. It's about choosing the harder path when a path is made available to you. And it's about ultimately being able to use a tool of provably sound money to make your life better and the lives of people around you better, whether that's the lives of a country if you're a senator or congressman or a part of this administration, or maybe it's just your four walls. But we have a fundamentally new technology. It's called Bitcoin. It's been working perfectly for about 16 years, and I'm very, very excited to see what it does next, and maybe it'll take some of us along for the ride with it.
The last question that I want to leave everybody with that I think is really important, and it's somewhat antithetical when you talk about proof of work and energy consumption with mining Bitcoin. A lot of people would look at it and say, well, you're spending all of this energy, and they would come up with whatever that number is today and say, that's bad. We can't be consuming this much energy to, you know, secure these imaginary Mario coins into the internet, is the narrative that you would hear. And what I found really fascinating through all the interviews that I've done with people through the years is some of them will make the argument that Bitcoin is one of the best ESG incentives that has ever existed. And for somebody to hear that and say, come on, give me a break. Help the audience understand, for a person that's making that argument, talk about the incentives for miners. So, I mean, Harry understands mining probably better than anybody on the planet. He's done it for a very long time. And talk to this incentive that these miners have to go find 4 cents per kilowatt hour electricity, and then what that does to the hub when they do discover this wasted, stranded energy, what that does to promote other economic growth in these types of areas, and just talk about that whole incentive structure that Bitcoin mining creates.
Well, it really starts with the earliest days of the North American continent being, you know, discovered and settled by Europeans. So the reason that our country looks the way that it looks today, geographically, is because we were a port people when those earliest days were happening. And then as we innovated, we became energy people. And so we welded our energy system on top of our port system because the geography required it. And so what Bitcoin mining does, and this isn't hypothetical, this is what we've done at CleanSpark, is we've said, what would you do if you didn't have a geographical constraint to building a huge energy customer? And what would you do if that same customer also had complete flexibility to give that power back when the system needed it? And so we've designed a multi-billion-dollar business around that idea. We have no geographical constraint, and we have no obligation to run other than to be a great partner and citizen in the communities where we've built our data centers. And so that's taken us to places like rural Georgia, rural Tennessee, Wyoming, and Mississippi, because those are places where the energy infrastructure was sufficient, but the roads and hospitals and schools were insufficient to recruit the type of traditional manufacturing or traditional data center businesses that would typically be overlaid on that energy infrastructure. So we said, great, we don't need that. We don't have geographical constraints. We don't have infrastructure constraints other than power lines. And wherever we go, we're gonna sign the most flexible power contract you've ever seen, because we're proud to give that power back as a mining community to be a supportive force when a hurricane comes through. When the hurricane came through Georgia and East Tennessee, we shut down, not because the physical infrastructure was broken, but because hospitals and schools are more important to us than another 7 hours of runtime. And so we as an industry then can become a force for change in places in the country that didn't benefit from the technology boom of the last 30 years. They will benefit from the Bitcoin boom of the next 30 years because there are companies like miners who are prepared to come in, upgrade infrastructure, and watch the snowball roll from there.
But I think it's also important to talk about what happens to the cost of that energy during that scenario. So it's not, let's say we don't have somebody that has the same ideals, because that seemed like a very idealistic narrative or talking point. But what I think is missed on a lot of people is it's not based on ideals alone. It is based on economic incentive. So the prices during those scenarios shoot so high that you're losing money if you keep your rigs on through that scenario. So you are economically incentivized to shut them off, opening up the grid and all that excess power to the places that need it most because it's a free and open market for energy.
Yeah, forgive me, my capitalism has to show. Yeah, those are just uneconomic hours. So the reason that we sign these maximum flexibility contracts is because that's the only way we can get the competitive pricing that we need. So we put that flexibility on the table out of the gate because we need the prices that it unlocks. And then if we enter into a more market-driven power market, so two types of power markets. One, you sign a power cost that comes with a formula. The other one comes with a market price. And we operate in both. So when we enter into a market-based pricing environment, we know that the pinch points are going to be fundamentally lost hours for our mining operation. So maybe we'll generate, using the rough round numbers blended over a number of years, maybe we're able to generate $100 a megawatt hour in revenue. 9,860 hours in the year, 9,760, the price of power in that region is $40. We've got a nice spread that lets us invest in our infrastructure. The business is functional. Everybody does great. The town makes money. We make money. Constructive. Those last 100 hours a year represent 30% of the profit for the utility in the year. So they're not $40 a megawatt hour. They're 400 or 4,000. And so you have these very compressed periods of extreme outsized pricing in the way that our energy systems were designed. Those energy systems typically are used to amortizing those excess costs over the whole year. But with a Bitcoin miner, we'll just shut off for them because those are losers. We wouldn't want to run through those at all. Yes, it helps the community. Yes, it does good. It's also non-economic. And so the reason I think that Preston, you mentioned this being the most constructive ESG relationship is because we don't have to compromise between doing well and doing good. Good is well and well is good for us because the power markets are a direct expression of the needs of the community at any given time.
So Senator Cruz wasn't able to make it. Evidently, he was voting, and that was one of the reasons why he wasn't here. But as a senator out of Texas, and having a lot of miners in Texas, and a state that had a somewhat unstable grid 5 years ago, and now it's in a completely different spot. I would like to think that this is the conversation and some of the highlights that he would have liked to have had on stage for people listening as to the power of Bitcoin mining, why proof of work is important, and how it's ESG, a natural ESG incentive without any type of policy decisions required. It just is naturally there. So hopefully this conversation was useful. Thank you, Harry, for amazing answers and responses to those questions. And I hope you guys had a wonderful conference.